Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode in the Bringing Light to the Darkness series here on Sirius Blue. Yeah, just good to be back. My work has been incredibly busy with clients, and I love my work. I love my job, so I'm no complaints. But I certainly have not been on social media in quite a while. And I want to share some of the new memories I've been, slowly gathering over these months. And, it's an ongoing process as I sort of step further away from my father's death, dad being such a pivotal part in this whole story. I continue to gather more of my experiences from this realm and off-world. So happy to share some really interesting info about my experience on Mars that I've not shared before anywhere, and kind of a lighter aspect to that story. And it's so anomalous. It is, just over the span of days in which this came in, I was like, oh yeah, wow. I'll get there. Let me dive into that. And then I will be talking about the New Mexico Dulce base and how that's connected to the moon in my experiences. So those are the main themes today, and happy to be starting on a somewhat lighter note. And first, just a little update. In my last video, I'd spoken about my godfather, who, through a strange quirk of fate, destiny, I'm not sure. He lives very close to me. Unfortunately, he was a major handler who trafficked me to deep state child. I guess a way to say it in a sanitized way would be deep state child porn events. When I was recording and talking about him last time, and as I uploaded the video, this was months ago, but I haven't been on here, so I haven't been able to share this with you. His heart stopped. He was helivaced out of here and almost died. He's now on a sort of a life support system, and apparently he's still hanging in there. It's not like I'm in contact with him, but I'm friends with a neighbor, so this is the only reason I know, and through his son, who I'd had contact with as well. So you can't make that stuff up, and there is absolutely a link. There's a karmic connection there, I'm sure. There's a vibrational effect, that ripple effect, traveling in ineffable ways that kind of astounding, I thought. So I wanted to just bring that full circle. Yeah. And so to pause here and just a preamble about Mars. I was sent there when I was 9. I will be very brief because I've talked about this and other things that I'll mention today in previous videos, so I won't give you a lot of backstory on this, but I was taken to Mars when I was 9 and was out there 20 years, certainly, if not longer. I was trained as basically we could call it in colloquial terms, super soldier, a weaponized asset. And I was a cyborg, basically, who was then cloned and sent to other places and traded. But I haven't shared my memories of battle scenes. There are more flashbacky still, and I know that I'm holding back the parts where we were killing each other, the parts where I killed beings, possibly benevolent or neutral beings, as part of my work, as part of my service or enslavement, as I kind of prefer to call it in blunt terms. Those memories are still a bit jumbly, and I will go into some of those later. But, considering being off-world for that many years and trained for war, there would be many, many battles and, overlapping in which part belongs to which part of the story. If we're going to tell the whole Mars story in a linear way, did this happen in the first 5-10 years, or was this later, or when was that battle with the mantids? I'm not sure, and that's understandable. And I'll, frankly, I'll be getting memories back for many years. I don't know if the fight will ever finish. It may not, ever complete, but I'm happy for what I do know and do realize. So, how to dive into this part of the story. This is not necessarily battle related. One of my jobs at the base, on Mars Defense Force, was really patrolling and keeping safe the base. Many of us were tasked with that because we were in under constant threat from the natives, so to speak. Particularly what I remember there are mantids, skirmishes with mantid beings, native mantids, who certainly didn't want us there, and we could understand why. But this was, remember I've said I was a pilot, and I have really good memories of flying alone, always connected through what we could call a mechanized implant to Central Command at base. It's not like I could drive away, they would know where I was. But in some instance, I was quite far away from the base, and I don't recall being with a bunch of us together. I was doing what felt like a recon mission on my own, and it's so beautiful. Like I've described Planet X, my memories of being in a solo craft and operating a craft on my own are absolutely the best memories that I have of being off-world. Definitely. So this contains that, but yeah, absolutely beautiful. And the sense of freedom there is profound. I mean, compared to everything else that was going on, even though I'm not a free being, I'm definitely in servitude. I'm definitely owned. I am an owned asset at this point. My craft went down somewhere far away, fairly far away from base, and I was injured. I wasn't alive all the way exactly, but I wasn't dead. And remember, I am both biology and technology at the same time. And I think part of my tech was broken, and that's why they couldn't track me wherever I had gone down, because, depending on how valuable I was to them at any given time, how long it had taken to make this particular clone, they would come and find me, perhaps. Usually that would be true, but I don't think they could in this instance. And here's another aside before I get back into what happened after I crashed, is that I want to share this. It's really bizarre. My memories of driving craft are beautiful, but the craft that I was driving on Mars, or operating, is, my memories over and over are of these clunky, kind of ghetto, like retro vintage, like 60s, 70s military helicopters. And when this started coming in, I was like, what? This makes no sense to me. Oh, but there you have it. It had been retrofitted for Mars, and they were very much, hybridized vehicles, let's say, but nevertheless, this sort of, you can imagine, this very clunky, kind of clunky junky, like a junker, like when you get your first car and it's like this total beater. It wasn't quite that bad, but it's like, oh, no wonder I went down. But it was spliced with high tech and help from other beings who had, again, retrofitted it for Mars. This is my impression. They must have been like, what was this, the shoestring budget, I guess? I don't know, like an early pilot program. But when I was sharing this with a friend, he said, I've heard this from somebody else's testimony. I don't think this is crazy. Because I was like, I must have, is this a screen memory? What is going on? So I wanted to just kind of a funny aside, like, what am I doing driving this piece of junk? Should have been decommissioned a long time ago. That said, there was higher tech going on between my mind and the implants in my mind with the machine. So we were wed in a way, and it wouldn't have been quite like just driving a helicopter. There was more going on with the whole story and piloting it. But when I went down in the middle of seemingly nowhere, which pretty much Mars feels like that from what I recall, middle of nowhere is everywhere, which on Earth are my favorite places. I think I've mentioned before. Cold tundra, desolate deserts, I absolutely love, especially when I'm by myself. Totally. And I feel a deep spiritual connection to the earth when I'm on those places. But let me get to the story. I was picked up and in part we could say stolen, because I was I was an expensive like asset. I was a thing, basically, not a human, but a thing that I was owned. I was an owned creature, and partially though saved. I met a group of, I want to call them native Martians, beings from native Mars. Beings who had been there a long time, that were humanoid reptilians. Those are the sort of a mix of, they weren't human, they weren't entirely reptilian, kind of short, stocky, with our human frame of reference, we could say probably a little homely. Yeah. And they were not, I feel myself trying to be diplomatic. They were not what you'd call like the brightest bunch. They were not like the sharpest tool in the shed kind of thing. But listen to this. They absolutely had been regressed through some kind of cataclysm on Mars. That is why they did not, on the surface, seem very advanced. They had absolutely no technology that we would think of being associated with extraterrestrials, or beings from other worlds. They seemed to have no weapons, definitely no craft. So when they found me, they were like, it seemed like, like I was picked up, like somebody who's like a white lady who's like dropped in the jungle and being picked up by some, native group that's never seen like Western folk. It feels a little bit like a tale like that. So they brought me back to where they were living, which turns out to be underground, which makes sense. I didn't have telepathy with them. I could kind of read them in other ways, but there wasn't a two-way telepathic conversation going on. So it was hard to discern in a direct, chatty way with them. Who are you? What are you doing? Where am I going with you? They took me back to an underground, actually stupendously beautiful environment. I cannot believe I'm saying this about Mars, but it was, bear with me because I'll explain what I understand about this. Lush, water running, somehow there was light inside of it. And trees are the word that come to mind. I don't know if they're actually like earth trees, but vegetation of some kind. Quite lovely, actually. So these beings, despite their lack of tech in common terms, or the usual conventional sense of tech, had developed a spiritual relationship with the planet Mars, much like our indigenous earth cultures have developed over many, many long years and centuries, millennia, their relationship with Earth. And they had somehow been able to co-create with the Mars energies, the energies of the planet, to create a sustainable world for themselves, even though they didn't have, like I said, they didn't have what we would normally think of as any kind of advancement at all. But they were growing, creating, I don't know how, co-creating some kind of food. And I remember being in a circle with them. I mean, they had a social structure that seemed the most similar to humans, probably of any of the groups that I can recall right now. I remember being in a circle with them and eating something. Like, I wish I could remember exactly what it was, but there was a, what happened to me here didn't go well, and I'll get to that, but there was a sense of them not exactly wanting to harm me. They wanted to find out how I might be useful to them. That is very true. But but they were not unkind to me. And this is, I'm saying this relative to everything else that happened to me up to this point that I've talked about in these videos. These people were like saviors. I mean, remember, that's all relative. I don't want to say quite a warmth, but there was a relaxation maybe that I felt there. So again, in a way, they had stolen me and also maybe saved me from something. I think they may have saved me from death in other ways. Let's see what else about these guys. A message I got over and over after the memories started coming in was that they wanted to inspect my soul, which does indicate a kind of spiritual connection, a very, very spiritual connection, a spiritual level of advancement. I think it's really beautiful. But yeah, they really wanted to know what I was and how they might be able to do something with me. You know, another race would have known exactly how to get at my DNA and use it to splice with their DNA to save themselves, because they were going down the tubes genetically. This group that picked me up was maybe 20 or 30 people. They didn't seem to be having other groups around. I don't know the entire story yet. Maybe I never will, but it was a sense of like the end of the road for them in some way, or I think this was kind of an inbreeding thing. So another ET race would have known what to do with me and gotten my DNA and, you know, fixed themselves up maybe in some way, or taken something that they could have used and also done something with the tech. But these guys, I think, were like, didn't know how, was not there. Just my impression. So yeah, all of this is still, as I'm talking about it, I'm delighted to be speaking on it, because I did a few interviews, you know, since my last video on this channel, and I wasn't able to chat on this. So like, I'm super psyched to share this. What else? Yeah, they were in some ways not unlike the indigenous peoples of our planet. Not in all ways. I mean, our indigenous people are, you know, have not been regressed in such a blunt, crude way, but just the relationship they had with their planet was immaculate. It was absolutely phenomenal. So it's quite a thing for me to contemplate, you know, working with the energies of a planet to then create. If you can get in that much union with your home planet, what might be accomplished. So remembering that planets are living beings, the Earth is a living being, Mars is a living being. You know, I used to be afraid I hated seeing the moon and Mars in the sky. And then I realized, you know, even the moon with all of its, you know, quandary of a history and such, there's ascended energies and things. You know, Mars has its ascended energies, and that's what they were connecting with. I find that very poetic, very, very poetic. So yeah. It is, you know, is it possible that I just have Stockholm syndrome about this group because they picked me up and I was hanging out with them for some time? I don't know. It's just a really remarkable story in all of my memories. I think because too, there's a beauty to it. Their environment underground was really remarkable, very much so. And I wonder if other Mars people who were taken to programs on Mars have come in contact with them, this native group. They were not interested in hurting me. They were curious rather than malicious, and interested rather than controlling. But in the end, they cannibalized me for parts, and it didn't go good. You know, I was killed. Yeah, this was a clone being, but still me nevertheless. Like I said, another higher race would have understood how to use. You don't need to kill a being to get DNA. You can use their spit. I mean, it's in everywhere, so you wouldn't need to terminate, you know. And also to get some sort of figure out the tech, to back engineer the tech, would they have had to completely kill me? Maybe, I don't know, complete the, or, you know, sort of exterminate the tech to reverse engineer it, maybe. I do think a different race would have found ways to maybe use me in a better way, or to get their needs met, or some kind of genetic and cultural salvation. I don't know, but you know, there's how that story went. But I do have you know, the happier memories of piloting, which, yeah, very happy memories. If there are to be happy memories, you know, like I said this about Planet X, there is that. And also just, I'll never forget that underground type of oasis, and how it seems to have come about is really just so remarkable. You know, I keep going back and thinking about that. If they could do that, what could we do? I do remember they had a council meeting about, I remember this, about what my fate would be. I don't think I was at the meeting, but I could read what was going on, and I think I knew what was coming. I knew what was coming. So I'll leave this here, but I think some of you will find that rather fascinating, perhaps as much as I do. And then little bit, I may have touched on this in some recent interviews, I don't recall. Also from Mars, at the base, during my time there, I recall very much these skirmishes that we were having with a group of future super soldiers. Our commanders, this threw me for a loop at first. Our commanders had kind of orchestrated this to bring these, they were cyborgs. I would call them superior AI beings with very little humanity in them at all. Our commanders had orchestrated to bring them in to see how long it would take for us to notice they weren't really of us, they weren't like us, and what we would do about it. I think they did it to amuse themselves, but also to see if we could entirely be brought into that timeline and what would happen. So very curious. I remember the beings being a lot of white, like a carapace that was kind of shiny, you know, I don't know what the material was. It's futuristic, you know, it's not like it's plastic, but it was shiny, kind of like that, and more, yeah, opaque, some kind of metal, or certainly a sturdy material. And they were so AI, they were so kind of creepy and eerie in that way. And we were, this is so weird, but being pulled, some of us were also pulled into this future timeline. And it's, I keep feeling in my mind, in myself, in the memory, that it feels like almost a future breakaway civilization. That is, keeps being my word for it. But I keep seeing this, again, very white, elliptical structures in this future place that they came from. Tall, kind of, I guess the analog would be building, but this is more advanced than that in some way, and not necessarily an ugly place, but just something really eerie and wrong about it. It was like humanity was gone, and it was all these, sounds like a bad dream. I mean, really. Yeah. So basically like a super soldier timeline war. And what we discovered, I and my compatriots, during all this, is that they were not able to think for themselves, and thus they were defeatable. They could be defeated because they were not autonomous at all in their minds. They were completely, for lack of a better word, I guess I would say digitalized in some way. So the lesson there, of course, is about the strength of our humanity. And there's much more to this, and the different things that were going on with it. But I thought that was a fascinating, perhaps a takeaway from it, is how could, you know, they were much more advanced than we were as far as like their tech and their capacity to be soldiers and such. But in the end, we were able to outsmart them because we had more of our humanity intact. We were still enslaved by the system and, had so many, like I've said before, chemical, mechanical, biological enhancements, electrical enhancements, that, at what point you become a machine. For whatever reason, though, there was definitely a disparity there, and we were able to defeat them. The eerie thing, too, on another level is that I've said, some of them, us, were sent into the future. And I don't know if all of me came back from there. I don't have full recall on all of that. But I've said, and I've felt, I know there's other places I went to, and those sort of memories are pieces of different places. They're like pods of memory that I don't always connect until I get more of the memory over time. Like there's just this piece and it's disjointed from a linear narrative. I know I was sent to other places beyond Moon, Mars, and Planet X, and I'm being quiet about that until everything has been more fully revealed to me, memory-wise, until I talk about that. But I know I was also sent into other time, and this is part of that. I do not know what became of that, and that gives me, when I talk about this, and now when I write about it, I get chills. So I know there's something there, like big chills. So that's to be continued. I've spoken about that in other interviews, the clones that were sent into other nonlinear realities or places that are beyond our space-time continuum. What happens with them? So these are ongoing questions for me and ongoing things that I contemplate and connect with the memories that I've had to discern the bigger picture. Again, an ongoing, perhaps lifelong process. So I hope that is useful to somebody out there. I'm just pausing here to, it's funny, when I was getting ready to make this video and thinking about, what do I want to talk about? I'm like, it's going to be light because I can just talk about, the native Mars race that picked me up. And I'm like, oh, wait, but you want to talk about Dulce and keep it light? No way. That's not going to happen. So here we go. How is Dulce connected to my narrative? Gosh, I'll pause. When I first began talking about my experiences on the moon, over and over, it felt like, and I would describe this again in interviews, like it sounds like in what I see, what I remember is very much like what is described about the Dulce, New Mexico base. It's so much more than a base. It's way more than a base. I don't have a lot of words for it, but to the point here is that actually the moon and Dulce, there's a gate there. There's a jump gate that takes you as if you're walking into the next room of your house, into the bathroom, the kitchen. You open the door. You don't really realize you left your house, or you left, in this case, I left the moon, went through a gate to Dulce. And that explains so much. When that piece of the puzzle slipped in, I went, oh, for fuck's sake, of course. It wasn't wrong. I felt like it was crazy, but I wasn't wrong. And I rejected the information about Dulce because it didn't fit into like my version of what was possible. And also, I fought this because it's like I wanted to deny having this be part of my story too, along with Montauk. I did the same thing with Montauk. I was like, there's no way that I was sent there too. They couldn't use me all that much, could they? There's a little aside there, and I will talk about this more in probably the next video, is my father's role has also become more clear to me in all of this. Yeah. This is hard to say, but it connects to why why the kids in whose parents work in, you know, the military industrial complex are getting vetted to, we're used really hard. And it's because, like in my case, my father sold me. He made money. There was an exchange, negotiated a contract. So I think they get to use us more even than the other folks. That's my impression. So I will share that about my own experience and why I had to get over this resistance about looking into the Dulce connection. I was pissed. I was like, this is no fucking place for any human, let alone a child. I can just feel that, like, everything else, yeah. Not even. Montauk is along similar lines. But it's hard to digest this level of depravity and deviance. In between the moon and Dulce, you know, God, there's so much to this. You know, the gray is the common factor, at least in my memory, how this could overlap with, you know, there's Germans, there's Draco and Greys that I interacted with, mostly Draco at the moon facility, moon base, which I believe is very likely a Dark Fleet base. And recall, this is all back in the 1970s. 1970s. And yeah, wow. If you didn't listen to the back videos where I talk about the moon, you'll get a little more backstory on that. I was young. This all happened before I was sent to Mars at age 9. This was prior. So just in the timeline, if you want to go linear about it. Another interesting fact is that I lived very close to Dulce, New Mexico for almost 20 years. I think there's a reason there. Something I was trying to remember, retrieve, or some weird attraction. I don't know. Far out, right? Anyway, Dulce, what was happening there? You know, I would say about, where do I even start? There's a lot of cloning, hybridization experiments, DNA stuff going on in Dulce, of course. The sort of sterilized topside operations are going on in the moon, and Dulce being a black project within a black project kind of thing. It's very, very rogue, the most rogue of anything I've seen yet in my own experience. It was like the dungeon. I call it the dungeon, or I mean, it was a kind of hell realm. I mean, no human should be in there, at least the levels that I was sent to and working in, which was literally the dungeon, the bottom of the facility. I never saw humans down there unless they were subjects to what was going on, but not human controllers. This was completely rogue ET stuff going on. My impression was that Greys were running it. And of course, with their own agenda and their own genetic needs and funneling humans into their so many different, this melange or soup of different things. I mean, down there was so much going on, you'd never reach the end of it. You'd never know everything. No one person probably know everything that was happening deep down in there. Highly, highly deviant. So again, my impression was that human players, if there were any, were bit players. Maybe they were working topside on something more sanitized, but this was not that. It was very dim light in there. Never any lights like this at all. It was dim, and the only light there seemed to be was emanating from kind of curious sources within cages and contraptions and I want to say like vats. So one of my jobs, I mean, I was a telepath using my, mind-to-mind communication to basically get data, running data back and forth through this, but I just felt like I was stealing information from benevolent beings. Another function, kind of sideshow to this, is that the gate itself seemed to need a child's frequency of some kind to ferry cargo back and forth from Dulce to the moon. And this, again, there's a lot going on at Dulce. Part of this related to the moon, and that the moon, they would clone, and then they could use some of that in the slave trade. There's a lot to all this, and I don't know probably the beginning and end of it, but I can share what I have learned. So what else? I do remember that, gosh, there was so much happening down there. Yeah, there's things I don't even want to talk about in a way. Like, I remember beings they seem to be from inner earth, through my journeys in the astral to inner earth. I think they'd gotten the DNA somehow in, again, some really rogue way, to take the DNA and then create creatures. There's beautiful, what I've seen in the astral is very beautiful. We call them animals, but they're like, they have the intelligence that, I mean, we think of animals as being, not as smart as we are. Sentient, completely sentient, light-filled beings from the inner earth. Somehow they'd gotten DNA and then spliced it with something else and then created something else entirely. I remember those being in some kind of, in cages. I remember a lot of luminous, sort of luminosity there. They were also working with getting, I think, humans to become more psychic, elevating their frequency in some way. These are just pieces and parts. So I'm going to read you a little bit of the direct stuff from my transcriptions. I write everything I get in a journal. I've been journaling since I was, I don't know, just 20 years old, 3 decades of journaling. But I take everything as I'm getting memories or anything coming in, I'm writing it down, and then I transcribe it into digital. So let me read you a little bit of that here. A minute. Some of the, okay, so some of the words I had written to describe this to myself, in private were, yeah, can get a little closer in than I can maybe describe adequately today. Sickness, stench, depravity, misery, death, and disease. And as I'm writing down, this was back in November actually, as I'm writing down what I'm seeing and remembering, there's body parts, human body parts, like an assembly line or something, and there's trade going on around it. Humans, it's abducting humans, babies who have never seen the light of day. They're brought in through a kind of tunnel system. What I see are gray extraterrestrials. It's the most illicit activity that humankind could possibly fathom, but the masterminds are not human, and we have not been able to defeat them. We have cooperated with them. There's a little piece there, and then I think a few days later, and I want to share this verbatim because it captures things better than I can do in the moment right now. This I received from my, just one of my galactic self aspects, who said, you were making a record of the highest level of accomplishment that they had achieved in Dulce and bringing it back with you to the moon so it could be replicated. They were replicating successful experiments. An experiment meaning a being that had been created or altered in a successful way. Sometimes you would bring specimens home through the jump gate, and sometimes you would just bring data. It's true you were used in Dulce only after you had learned certain skills which you needed before you could be sent there. You could say you had to prove your worth, your reliability in a certain situation. And also I was sent to Montauk and really messed up there before they sent me on into the moon Dulce gig. I'd been going to do lighter duty at the moon, and then I was taken out to Montauk, I think for more professional mind fracturing. So then they could send me into Dulce and have me operate in the ways that they needed. Yeah. She continued, you were sent back and forth from the moon to Dulce. It was a function that beings on the moon couldn't perform themselves. You were finding things out, some of which was secret. And then I went, oh, in my journal, I said, oh, like I was supposed to be doing I wasn't supposed to be doing what I was doing, but I was doing it. I was going as an official liaison, but I was also gathering intel. And then I realized, oh, of course, because threading through my whole off-world journey, all these programs and experiments, I was also working with the Light Alliance, and that's part of the soul mission I had, was to gather intel about the slave trade. I've talked about this in other interviews and on this channel, so if you haven't watched other of my series here, go back and check that out. Same thing with the moon information, more detail there. So I would say, just to clarify, I was sent, when I was sent to Mars, that was for one stint, but I was being taken out at night as a child to go back and forth to the moon, like getting on, I know I was taken out, abducted into a substation, and from there I would travel in a craft, like seems to be something like a warp drive sort of propulsion system that would then physically take me to the moon. And I would come back into my bedroom again. But this would be like going out, punching a clock, going to work, coming back in really no time. So just to explain sort of the linear maybe aspect of that, maybe that brings a little more understanding to the timeline. So gathering information for Team Light through my work in very much dark, the dungeon of Dulce. So, in a way, I get it from that, again, from that perspective. I'm like, oh yeah, thank you for reminding me of that. This is really fascinating. Yeah. There's a little more here I can share with you. Oh, I said, what else do I need to know about this right now? And again, one of my galactic self aspects saying, it was hard, lonely, and despairing work for you. A grave darkness, a danger came inside of your heart. Where are all the mothers of these creatures to bring them home? Where has all the goodness gone? Once you've gone to a place like this, you can no longer be sure. You too would lose your faith in the world here, and at such a young age also. It would seem to you that a blackness in its entirety had consumed the whole human race. Everything that's happening here defies the workings of the human mind and its understanding and third density. So a little bit of the psychological and maybe spiritual element, emotional element there. That's important to attach to these kind of stories, which can get really conceptual and information laden without being connected to the heart and the true experience of the matter. And it's heartbreaking. This and Montauk just really fucked me up. The deep depravity that's been going on this planet is certainly that I was subjected to. It's more than I can hold sometimes. And I love doing my own videos because I can take it to a more vulnerable place, and I like to be as I am truly with this. Sometimes in interviews, it's not like I'm consciously containing it, but I think I'm more careful, more controlled. I like to share my heart more. I get why. You'd say, why couldn't they do this? They could not do this stuff on the moon. And they needed the traffic from the tunnels to do what they were doing and to get pieces and parts, humans. Again, I would say the Greys and other races too, perhaps, are very interested in the human endocrine system and how that can be useful to them, the glandular system. I've talked about this in other videos too, but I almost felt like a cloning elements of the endocrine system, or learning how to replicate what they needed in some way. Of course, I don't understand how all this was done. And, you know, just because I've gone through jump gate doesn't mean I get how it works. My impression there is of compressing space and time to put it in a sort of very much oversimplified way. Yeah, thanks for bearing with me there. And, you know, my emotions about all this as I go through my day-to-day, and my life is busy. I've got a lot of clients. My work has been pretty off the hook. I know there's more to release from my heart about all this and how messed up it all is. So it's really good when this comes out of me, whether I'm in private late at night or on record. I really don't care. But that's part of how we heal and how the collective heals, is not through conceptualizing all the information and all this stuff, but it's actually when the collective begins to feel this stuff at a deep level, it begins to really clear from humanity. So maybe that's why this had to come through just like this today. I'm glad it helps everybody heal. Because what I've said too recently, interview, you know, when anything like this has happened to one person on this planet, it's happened to everybody. We've all been deranged by what, you know, you might not claim this as your story, it belongs to me, but it belongs to everybody, because this darkness is written into the human fabric, you know, the human story. And now we're in this transition point where we're getting it out. So just glad to be real here. This is the place where I do that the most, as you know from the series. So thank you for bearing witness and holding me through that bit. It is important. And it's nothing I would ever want to cut out or edit out. It's real. So, just going to pause there and hold some light around the whole equation, really, of all of this, everything that I went through, everything that countless people have been through on some level. Like I said, our stories are wed. We are ultimately a collective in unity. Yeah, so holding light around the whole of all of us, bringing light into it. So little bit on gates and such. I would say that just as there's ways to create different ways to create a clone, there's different ways to make jump room, jump gate. That's my impression, depending upon the group that created it or helped create it. There might be different levels of tech with different, somewhat different outcomes. Ultimately, the outcome's the same. You're getting from point A to point B very quickly. So I would share that. I would also want to say what I have seen psychically is that the Dulce facility on Archuleta Mesa was built on a portal, very different from a jump gate, or this is totally different, like a Stargate, in that in older times, used by benevolence or ancient, the ancient ones, I'll call them, indigenous peoples, to connect with benevolent beings from the stars and other places. And these portals, as you probably know, can become into the hands of, they're controllable. You know, the dark forces can get their hands on them. That was absolutely what was going on. Part of my function on Planet X out there in the atmosphere was protecting, you know, the Draco assets. They'd come and control the portal there, or at least one very significant portal, and they were very much interested in defending it and keeping it to their own devices and their service to self agenda. So I feel very strongly that that's also what was going on with how did this happen here? Why here? There's so much profound spiritual energy in that area of the world. So much, so much, so much. So I think that, to me, that feels significant to add here. Yeah. So what else? I think that might be, we could be nearing the end. It's not such a long video. This one, I would say too, that I'd seen, of course, we know about the moon and Mars, gates connecting the two very much so, very easily, but also Antarctica to Mars with the Germans, the German base in Antarctica also connecting to Mars. And so they're all over the place. I mean, they're not superpowered like a Stargate. It's totally different, but in my impression anyway. And also, from speaking of Antarctica, then another kind of entryway entirely, which is not the same as really a portal, or certainly not like, it's not a jump room. It's built into the structure of the Earth itself. There's an entryway into inner Earth. So lots to think about here in terms of different ways to get from place to place in a way that's not walking or driving a craft. So yeah, and I could turn us up on a lighter note here, going back into the Light Alliance. I call them the Light Alliance. I spoke of them briefly before, who I was, when I was getting abducted for my sort of more nefarious programs, my work there, I was also being taken up in a dual way into a galactic confederation ship with Syrians, Pleiadians, and Procyon beings. And you may go back and listen to other videos. I talk about my Tyran, who is Procyon, aboard that ship. And they had, to talk about craft, I talked about that clunky helicopter, man. That was like, what? Oh gosh, the craft that these guys had was this group. There's many groups serving benevolent purposes in our solar system. Their craft, I must have talked about this, but why not? Let's just do it again. So beautiful. This is so beautiful. It's a living entity. The craft is alive. It doesn't have, my impression again is not that it did not have like a propulsion system you would find in other sort of maybe lesser groups. This was very elevated. It always looks very pastel to me, and asymmetrical, full of, it's a world. It's a world. It's a world. It's a living world inside of the craft. It's kind of paradise in a way. It's full of trees and flowing water and high frequency. We talk about a dungeon and all of this awful stuff. We're also talking about, this is the other end of that. This is pure illumination, totally luminous. And there, I'm going somewhere with this. I remember gates into other places, one of them being inner Earth. So take that and run with it. So how was that all happening? Like, they don't need, depending on the mission, the Light Alliance, as I call them, didn't need to actually take a craft all the time in physical, right? They need it to be in our atmosphere, certainly, and they need it for certain. It's more like it protects them and it keeps them in 3D, right? Or some fourth dimensional space, but they don't need it to take, depending on the mission, as I've said, they don't need to take it everywhere, from what I recall. And of course, inner Earth being its own kind of, I don't even know how to describe it. It's beyond, linear English language descriptors, beyond beautiful, beyond elegant, elevated, harmonized, unified. Yeah, like that. Didn't it kanishi kunumakaru magana ni kana kune. Dise kana magana mechanically mike. Neat and kunishi kuganishi kunimikish kinikiton. You should pause and feel this. Maybe you will feel and absorb some of it. It will help wake up your cells, your deep cellular memory. Dita makuke shikini magakatan la kate chicken ikanikun. Mukti kan kakushi konton. You people on earth must remember it's not all dualized and it's not all bad. Gishikunebe chicken makani shikolimiko. Danimikon. There are love and blessings written inside of your earth. Waiting for the humans to come home. Yeah. So there's a Lemurian, that's part of my galactic self talking, channels a lot of different things. So if you do a personal session with me, you'll probably hear a lot of that. If you get a reading from me, you'll hear a lot of that. So Lemuria and Inner Earth, I have wondered, it felt like on the mothership that there was a gate into, a portal into Lemuria. You know, so why not? But what I would say there too is that Lemuria and Inner Earth hold a similar resonance pattern, a similar harmonic frequency. In Lemuria, you know, Inner Earth. So Inner Earth is where, as I've been shown, information, important light codes, if you will, from Lemuria have been stored, for lack of a better word. It's preserving something for humanity from the ancient future, as it's always been presented to me from my guides. The ancient future can be rebirthed in part via the resonant frequencies of Inner Earth. So isn't that interesting? Inner Earth, New Earth, and such. I think that's, yeah. I can feel the vibrational shift. We went from Dulce into this, and I can feel, yeah, it's definitely a different frequency. Like I'm being bathed in this light as I'm speaking, and I'm sure that's where we need to kind of keep it. Is there anything else about all this? I mean, I'm sure I could go into other, you know, these stories are endless, aren't they? You could talk forever. Sometimes people contact me, they want to see if they can interview me for like an hour. And I'm like, what are we going to talk about? We'll stick our toe in the water. I mean, you know, you can, if I talk fast, we can get a lot in an hour, but interesting, right? Just to make the point that this stuff goes on and on. It's the never ending story, you know? And I'm so grateful that I've been able to remember as much as I have, you know, even though there's so much missing, you know, that I've shown up for the journey of remembering is probably one of the bravest things I've ever done in my life. So to encourage you, if you are out there sticking your toe in the water of your memories of very anomalous and maybe really fucked up experiences from these programs, it will always encourage you to go in, turn toward them, not away. You know, you might find yourself, you know, if you go slowly, it's always my recommendation. Sometimes we don't have a choice. You will find yourself more resourced than you think. I think there's a lot of support on our planet now for remembering. You know, we're being supported by this great transit that's happening for us. So I do. Yeah, I do. I have a host a women's support group. If you're an experiencer out there, that experiencer watching who is looking for sort of a group to be with like-minded, or I want to say like experienced people, people who've gone through something like this, you can message me about that. I also will, I'll have to plug my services here. Isn't this what you do on YouTube? Yeah, if you want to book a private session, that keeps me going. There's definitely Akashic intuitive readings, galactic attunements, past life readings, healing sessions, and so much inner child work kind of stuff is one of my go-tos there. A lot going on in those sessions these days. So on and on and on. Just go to the website, www.rebeccarosebarfoot.com. And beyond that, in the plug for my services, I'm just thanking you for joining me today. And Mane makanchi sigla makakina kai ramakata to shikana kai lamakamaka and jikuna makakata shikanaka nisi nisi anito ne lagima mus inikle to shikanakamakatina limokosho. Again, as we've said before, you are written with light, and you must remember this to move forward. See yourself as a being of light, a vehicle. Oh, a vehicle from the stars. Serving, benevolent outcomes on this planet. That is why you are here. All right, you guys. Well, I'm glad to deliver you a little bit of that today. We're ending on a light note. Thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you the next time.